In today's digital age, privacy has become a cherished and fiercely debated concept, constantly balanced against the benefits of connectivity, technological advancement, and security concerns. From the data-driven algorithms that personalize our social media feeds to the mass surveillance programs that claim to safeguard national interests, digital privacy and surveillance touch almost every part of modern life. The essence of digital privacy lies in an individual's right to control personal information, while surveillance refers to the systematic monitoring and collection of data, often with limited visibility or consent. These concepts form a dual narrative of empowerment and vulnerability. The journey of surveillance has transformed significantly since its origins, where state apparatuses and intelligence agencies monitored information in limited, targeted scopes. Today, technology allows for unprecedented data collection and analysis, effectively creating a landscape where people's lives are continuously monitored, analyzed, and often commodified. The debate surrounding digital privacy and surveillance is rooted in several ethical dilemmas, most notably the tension between ensuring national security and protecting individual rights, as well as the sacrifices in privacy individuals make for digital convenience. This video aims to delve deeply into the historical development, current practices, ethical dilemmas, and future of digital privacy and surveillance. Surveillance, as an organized state activity, dates back centuries, where states monitored communications and activities to maintain political control and detect threats. In the 20th century, surveillance became more sophisticated as governments, particularly during the Cold War, developed systematic intelligence gathering techniques. Physical surveillance, phone wiretaps, and postal interceptions were common, used in the context of both war and domestic control, such as the FBI's surveillance programs during the Civil Rights Movement in the United States. The advent of digital technology and the Internet revolutionized surveillance. By the 1990s, online communication and digital databases became invaluable tools for tracking and storing vast amounts of data. This technological evolution allowed for expanded surveillance reach, enabling governments to monitor individuals on a larger scale without needing physical presence or active cooperation. The events of September 11, 2001 marked a watershed moment for global surveillance. In response to rising security concerns, laws like the USA Patriot Act were introduced in the United States, granting government agencies unprecedented access to communication and data collection. This shift was not unique to the U.S. Similar laws and policies emerged worldwide, normalizing mass surveillance programs that now permeate daily life. Programs like the NSA's PRISM, which allowed the U.S. government to access private data from major tech companies, became emblematic of this new surveillance era. In recent years, whistleblowers like Edward Snowden exposed the extent of government surveillance, unveiling secret programs and agreements that had long operated under the public radar. These revelations sparked global discussions on the role of surveillance in democratic societies and the ethical boundaries of data collection. Public awareness grew, alongside a heightened skepticism of both state and corporate actors involved in data surveillance. Government surveillance encompasses a range of techniques and technologies aimed at monitoring and collecting information about individuals and organizations. This can include CCTV, location tracking via GPS, social media monitoring, and the collection of metadata from communication channels. Agencies like the NSA, National Security Agency in the US, GCHQ, Government Communications Headquarters in the UK, and others employ these tools extensively, often justifying their use under the banner of national security. However, in certain contexts, particularly authoritarian regimes, surveillance is also used to curb dissent, monitor protest movements, and enforce control over the population. Unlike government surveillance, corporate surveillance primarily focuses on gathering data for commercial purposes. Companies track user behavior through cookies, metadata, and app permissions to create user profiles that enable targeted advertising and personalized services. Social media platforms, online shopping websites, and digital advertising networks rely heavily on these practices to boost user engagement and drive revenue. Corporate data collection raises ethical questions about the extent to which companies can and should monitor users without their explicit consent. Social media platforms have mastered the art of data harvesting, gathering vast amounts of information about users' preferences, behaviors, and connections. This data is then used to optimize the user experience but also to sell advertising. Ethical concerns arise regarding the manipulation of user behavior through algorithms designed to increase screen time, often to the detriment of users' mental health and autonomy. Advances in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and biometric recognition have taken surveillance to new levels. Facial recognition technology, for example, is now used for both security and commercial purposes, but concerns about racial bias and privacy persist. Additionally, these technologies can enable predictive policing, a controversial practice where AI-driven surveillance forecasts potential criminal activity based on behavioral analysis. The GDPR, enforced in the European Union, set a global standard for data privacy, establishing principles such as data minimization, transparency, and the right to be forgotten. This regulation mandates that organizations have a valid reason for collecting personal data, with user consent as a central tenet. GDPR's impact extends globally, pushing non-EU countries and international companies to adapt their practices in line with its stringent data protection standards. California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA. This U.S. state law grants California residents rights to access, delete, and control the sale of their data. And China's Personal Information Protection Law, PIPL, enforces strict data privacy regulations, impacting both domestic companies and international tech giants operating in China, and PIPEDA, Canada, and LGPD, Brazil. Each country has adopted comprehensive privacy laws, showcasing a growing global emphasis on data protection. The United States relies on a mix of laws, like the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, ECPA, and the Patriot Act, that grant authorities certain surveillance capabilities, though not without controversy. The absence of a uniform, federal data privacy law contrasts sharply with regions like the EU, where GDPR provides a cohesive framework for privacy. VPNs and encryption technologies provide users with means to protect their privacy and data integrity. VPNs mask IP addresses and encrypt data traffic, helping users avoid location tracking, while encryption protocols such as SSL/TLS secure data exchanged on websites. Although these tools offer a level of privacy, they are not foolproof, as law enforcement agencies can still track certain activities if necessary. Anonymity-focused tools like the Tor network and privacy-focused browsers, e.g. Brave, empower users to browse without being tracked. However, they come with limitations, as using these tools can sometimes restrict website access and degrade browsing speed. Applications like Signal and Telegram use end-to-end encryption to ensure that messages remain private. While such apps are widely used by individuals who prioritize privacy, governments often challenge their security claims, especially in criminal investigations. Storing data in the cloud is convenient, but not without risks. Data can be exposed if security practices are weak, which is why end-to-end encryption and secure access policies are vital. Companies offering cloud services must implement stringent protections, as data breaches are becoming increasingly common. Platforms like Facebook and TikTok engage in extensive data collection to tailor user experiences and drive ad revenue. This monetization of personal data leads to ethical concerns, particularly when algorithms manipulate user engagement at the expense of mental health and privacy. Google's dominance in search engine use has enabled it to build detailed user profiles based on search habits, location, and preferences. While alternatives like DuckDuckGo offer more privacy-focused experiences, Google's market share underlines the challenge of adopting privacy-focused options. E-commerce platforms such as Amazon track user behavior to provide personalized recommendations, a practice that raises questions about consumer privacy and manipulation. In-store tracking, customer analytics, and predictive advertising continue to blur the line between personalization and privacy intrusion. One of the foremost ethical debates in digital surveillance is the balance between national security and individual privacy. Governments justify mass surveillance as essential for preventing terrorism, organized crime, and cyber threats. However, the ability to intercept, monitor, and analyze personal communications on a massive scale also risks infringing on individual rights and freedoms, particularly the right to privacy and freedom of expression. In the United States, the Patriot Act allowed government agencies to gather vast amounts of data in the name of security. While supporters argue that such measures deter terrorist activities, critics believe these laws establish a slippery slope towards authoritarianism. Similar scenarios exist in countries like China and Russia, where surveillance has been explicitly tied to state control, raising questions about the ethical implications of using technology to monitor and regulate citizens' daily lives. In an ethical framework, consent forms the backbone of any relationship between an entity collecting data and the individual whose data is collected. However, the consent process for data collection is often opaque and complicated, embedded in extensive terms of service agreements that are rarely read in full by users. Many users are unaware of the extent of their data collection or how companies and governments intend to use it. For instance, platforms such as Facebook and Google have faced backlash for their vague privacy policies and lack of transparency in data usage. Ethical concerns arise when companies monetize personal data without fully informing users, compromising trust and pushing the boundaries of consent. Digital surveillance opens up avenues for behavior modification, where collected data is used to influence or manipulate individual actions and beliefs. Social media platforms, for example, use algorithms designed to increase user engagement by personalizing content. Although this improves user experience, it also risks creating echo chambers, reinforcing biases, and manipulating perceptions, which can lead to societal polarization. Behavior modification through digital surveillance goes beyond social media. Governments can use surveillance data to influence public behavior subtly. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, governments in some countries used mobile data to track and influence individuals' movement and adherence to public health protocols. While such measures were intended to curb the spread of the virus, the ethical implications of such intrusive monitoring have sparked significant public discourse. In a world where surveillance is conducted by both state and corporate actors, the question of accountability becomes critical. Who holds the power to ensure that surveillance is used ethically and responsibly? When private corporations and governments gather data with minimal oversight, transparency suffers and abuse becomes a genuine concern. For example, the use of artificial intelligence in surveillance can lead to bias and discrimination, as algorithms may inadvertently target certain demographic groups. Facial recognition software, used widely by law enforcement agencies, has been shown to have higher error rates for people of color, raising concerns about discriminatory practices. Ethical surveillance would require clear guidelines, checks, and an established mechanism for accountability, ensuring that these technologies are used responsibly. When people are aware of being watched, it can restrict their willingness to express dissenting opinions, explore controversial ideas, or even engage in routine activities. Surveillance can create an environment of self-censorship, undermining free speech, particularly in societies where surveillance is pervasive. In countries where governments actively monitor citizens, such as China, citizens may be hesitant to discuss politically sensitive topics, fearing repercussions. This environment can chill political discourse and stifle the creative exchange of ideas, impacting democratic values. In societies with democratic governance, mass surveillance could slowly erode foundational rights, leading to increased governmental control over public opinion and reducing the public's capacity to challenge unjust practices. The impact of surveillance on democracy extends to civic engagement, where citizens' willingness to participate in political activities, demonstrations, or protests may be influenced by the awareness of surveillance. When individuals feel constantly monitored, their likelihood of engaging in activism may decrease, which ultimately weakens democratic participation. This reality is particularly evident in nations with strict surveillance systems, where political dissent is tightly controlled. In these cases, surveillance serves as a tool to monitor and suppress opposition, which can fundamentally destabilize democracy. In democratic nations, even the perception of extensive surveillance can dissuade citizens from participating in protests or critical political activities, leading to a decline in civic engagement and weakening democracy over time. The digital divide, wherein people have unequal access to technology and privacy protections, exacerbates existing inequalities. Wealthier individuals may have access to premium services that prioritize data protection, while lower-income individuals rely on free or less secure services, exposing them to greater privacy risks. Furthermore, surveillance technologies have shown biases, especially in facial recognition and predictive policing. Data-driven systems can disproportionately impact marginalized communities, reinforcing discrimination. Surveillance used for credit scoring, insurance, and hiring can reflect or amplify biases present in the datasets, often unfairly targeting vulnerable populations. The awareness of constant surveillance can have profound psychological effects on individuals. Studies indicate that people who believe they are being constantly monitored experience heightened anxiety, stress, and a sense of vulnerability. This chilling effect can harm mental well-being, leading individuals to modify their behavior in order to avoid scrutiny, which may not reflect their true selves or interests. Digital surveillance can also impact social relationships. With communication channels like social media and messaging apps under surveillance, people may feel less inclined to share openly, affecting their relationships with friends and family. The stress of being constantly monitored can lead to a decline in mental health, as individuals feel their privacy and autonomy are increasingly compromised. A phenomenon known as surveillance fatigue occurs when individuals grow desensitized or apathetic to the effects of constant monitoring. Over time, the overwhelming presence of surveillance can lead to an acceptance of these practices as the new normal. This gradual erosion of privacy expectations may condition individuals to accept intrusions on personal space, privacy, and autonomy as a regular part of life, eroding the value placed on privacy. Digital surveillance can foster distrust between individuals, as the potential for surveillance may cause people to second-guess their communications and relationships. When people fear that their conversations or interactions may be monitored, they may be less forthcoming or honest, affecting both personal and professional relationships. Over time, a sense of mistrust can damage social cohesion, leading individuals to feel more isolated and guarded. The surveillance landscape has implications for how individuals construct and express their identities. The knowledge of being monitored can inhibit people from exploring ideas, discussing sensitive topics, or expressing themselves freely, ultimately impacting how they view themselves and interact with society. This suppression of self-expression can be particularly limiting for young people, who are often in a formative period of identity development. When individuals feel constrained in their ability to communicate openly, it can limit their growth, creativity, and self-understanding, ultimately stunting their ability to engage meaningfully with the world. Surveillance, therefore, has the potential to reduce individuality, encouraging conformity and discouraging self-expression. Governments can introduce or strengthen data protection laws to give individuals more control over their data. Building on models like the GDPR, countries around the world could implement legal frameworks that require consent, limit data retention, and mandate transparency in data usage. Such laws should also be adaptable to evolving technologies, ensuring that they continue to protect individual privacy in the face of advancements in AI, biometrics, and predictive algorithms. Public trust in surveillance programs could be improved by increasing transparency and accountability. Governments could introduce oversight committees that include civil society representatives, privacy advocates, and tech experts to monitor the deployment and operation of surveillance programs. Periodic audits and public reports would help reassure citizens that surveillance is being used responsibly and proportionately. Investment in privacy-enhancing technologies, PETs, such as differential privacy, homomorphic encryption, and federated learning, can allow organizations to analyze data without exposing individuals' private information. These tools allow for secure, privacy-conscious data processing, enabling companies and governments to harness data insights while preserving individual privacy. education plays a pivotal role in empowering individuals to protect their privacy. By integrating digital literacy programs into school curriculums and public outreach efforts, individuals can learn about data privacy, understand their rights, and adopt protective measures such as using secure communication channels, strong passwords, and privacy-focused tools. Digital literacy could equip individuals with the knowledge needed to navigate a surveillance-heavy world safely and mindfully. Civil society organizations, advocacy groups, and digital rights activists play a crucial role in advocating for privacy rights. By raising public awareness, pushing for policy changes, and holding corporations accountable, these organizations act as a counterbalance to excessive surveillance. Civil society engagement ensures that privacy remains a public issue, empowering citizens to demand change and hold both corporations and governments accountable. As AI becomes increasingly integral to surveillance, it is essential to develop ethical guidelines to govern its usage. Policymakers and tech companies could adopt ethical frameworks that limit AI surveillance to ethically acceptable contexts, ensuring it doesn't contribute to discriminatory practices or violate basic human rights. A collaborative approach, involving input from ethicists, technologists, and human rights organizations, can ensure that AI-based surveillance respects individuals' rights and freedoms. In a world where digital privacy and surveillance intersect in complex ways, achieving a balance between privacy, security, and societal needs remains a challenging endeavor. Governments, corporations, and individuals all play a role in shaping the future of privacy as society navigates the ethical dilemmas posed by surveillance and data collection. Ensuring that surveillance practices respect human rights and protect personal freedoms is crucial to maintaining trust in digital ecosystems. With transparency, legal frameworks, and public awareness, it is possible to forge a path forward that respects privacy while recognizing the security needs of the digital era. Achieving this balance requires continuous vigilance, adaptation, and collaboration across all levels of society, fostering a world where technological progress does not come at the expense of individual autonomy and freedom.